Welcome to the Sewer Wealth Podcast, where we bring you the timeless wisdom of the world's greatest business and wealth-building books. In each episode, we break down proven strategies from legendary minds, so you can apply them to your own journey toward financial freedom and success. So, get ready to unlock the secrets of success, one book at a time.
Okay, so you guys have been sending in some seriously interesting stuff about habits, especially around James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. And for this deep dive, we're going to really get into it, try to boil down all the key insights, and see how those little, sometimes easy to miss habits can actually be the foundation for some pretty big personal changes.
Yeah, and you mean, think about it, right? It's all about how small actions, when you do them consistently, can create some pretty significant shifts in all sorts of different areas of your life. And I think to really get Clear's perspective, it helps to understand, where he's coming from, what he's been through. This isn't just some theory he came up with. It's really grounded in his own experiences.
Totally. Like right off the bat, the book opens with this, intense story. It was his sophomore year of high school, playing baseball, and he gets hit in the face with a bat, like a full swing that slipped. He doesn't even remember the impact.
Wow. Yeah, then the injuries were, they were bad. Crushed nose, multiple skull fractures, shattered eye sockets. But I think the scariest part was all the stuff that happened in his brain. Swelling, seizures. He was in a coma. It was touch and go for a while.
No kidding. And when he woke up, it was a long, tough recovery. He lost his sense of smell, and his left eye, it was messed up pretty bad. He had double vision for weeks, couldn't drive for 8 months. Even basic things, walking, moving his hands. He had to relearn all that in physical therapy. And baseball, which had been such a huge part of his life, it felt, out of reach.
Yeah, he really thought he might play professionally, like his dad had done. His dad played in the minors. So when he finally got back on the field a year later, and he was, the only junior cut from the varsity team, that must have been devastating. And then senior year, barely any playing time. I can't imagine how discouraging that must have been.
Absolutely. But this is where things take a turn, right? He doesn't give up on sports. And when he starts college at Denison University, it's like a fresh start. And this is when he starts to see, how much these little everyday habits really matter.
And it's interesting because he didn't jump right into some crazy training regimen. It was more like basic stuff, like making sure he got enough sleep, keeping his dorm room tidy. It seemed kind of small, but I think for him, it was about, feeling more in control, building some confidence.
And that seems to have a ripple effect. His study habits get better first time he gets straight A's. And with baseball, he makes the team. Starts at the bottom, but he's on the team.
Yeah, exactly. And he defines a habit as, something you do regularly, often without even thinking about it. And he sticks with these little habits, like he starts lifting weights regularly, and the changes become pretty obvious. He went from like 170 pounds to a solid 200.
Wow, that's a big change. And his baseball career, it takes off. Especially after that injury, who would thought? He ends up a starting pitcher, then captain his junior year, gets all conference honors. And then senior year, 6 years after that accident, he's named the top male athlete at Denison, ESPN Academic All-American. Pretty incredible.
Really amazing.
Yeah.
He's clear that he didn't, go pro or anything, but in a way, he achieved something even bigger. He realized his potential. And that whole experience, seeing how these small habits, added up to these unexpected positive outcomes, that's what made him want to share it with other people.
Right. So 2012 rolls around and he starts putting articles up on his website, jamesclear.com. He'd been keeping track of his own experiments with habits for years. And he finally decides, okay, I'm going to put this out there. Just a couple of articles a week to start.
And it's pretty cool how it grew organically. He's consistent with his writing, sharing valuable stuff. And pretty quickly, he gets his first 1,000 email subscribers. And then by the end of the next year, boom, over 30,000. Yeah. It shows how powerful it can be to just keep putting out good content.
It just kept snowballing. 2014, he hits 100,000 email subscribers, one of the fastest growing newsletters out there. He goes from, sharing his own journey to being seen as an expert on habits. And then in 2015, he gets a book deal. That's how Atomic Habits, the book we're talking about, came to be.
And the book's just the beginning, right?
Yeah.
As more people find his work, he gets all these opportunities to share what he's learned. He starts speaking at companies, talking about habit formation, behavior change, continuous improvement, even gives keynote speeches at conferences here in Europe.
Wow. Yeah, by 2016, his articles are showing up in Time, Entrepreneur, Forbes. Millions of people are reading his stuff. Even coaches in professional sports are taking notice, using his ideas in their training. And then in 2017, he launches the Habits Academy. That's become a pretty influential platform, helping people and organizations build better habits.
Over 10,000 leaders, managers, coaches, educators have gone through the Habits Academy. So, his work has had a huge impact. And by the time he's wrapping up the book in 2018, his website's getting millions of hits every month, and his email list is close to 500,000 subscribers. That's pretty amazing, a testament to the power of what he's teaching.
So what does all this mean for you, our listener? The core promise of this deep dive and of the book itself is to give you a clear, step-by-step plan to build better habits that last. It's all backed by science, using ideas from biology, neuroscience, philosophy, psychology. But it's written to be practical, like a user's manual for your own behavior.
Yeah, and at the heart of it all is his 4-step model of how habits form. Cue, craving, response, and reward. We're going to be talking a lot about that. It fits with established psychology, like, operant conditioning. Basically learning through rewards and punishments, where if you get a reward, you're more likely to do something again. But what's important is that his model also includes how you feel, your thoughts and feelings as part of the process.
Exactly. And it's important to remember we're not talking about something super specific here. This is about the fundamentals of how humans behave. And these are ideas you can use in all parts of your life, whether it's your health, your finances, how productive you are at work, even your relationships.
So to kick off this deep dive into building better habits, we're going to focus on 2 big ideas. First, why these tiny changes, these atomic habits, can actually lead to some huge and surprising results. And second, the connection between your habits and who you are, your identity. They really shape each other.
Okay, let's start with this atomic habits idea. Small, 1% improvements that might seem kind of pointless on their own. There's this great story about British cycling that shows how powerful this can be. Before 2003, their track record was, pretty bad. Almost 100 years, and they'd only won a single gold medal at the Olympics. And no British cyclist had ever won the Tour de France. In fact, some of the top bike companies didn't even want to sell them bikes.
Yeah, it was a history of, not really doing that well. But then in 2003, Dave Brailsford comes in as the new performance director, and he's got this idea, the aggregation of marginal gains. His thinking was break down every single part of cycling, every little thing, and figure out how to make it 1% better. He believed that all of those tiny improvements, when you added them up, would lead to a much bigger jump in performance overall.
And they really went all out with this. It wasn't just about the bikes. They redesigned the seats, super comfortable. They put alcohol on the tires for better grip. The riders wore heated shorts to keep their muscles warm during races. They used sensors to, fine-tune their training. They tested different fabrics in wind tunnels, even used lighter racing suits that were designed for indoors, outdoors.
It wasn't just the tech stuff. They looked at different massage gels for recovery. They even got a surgeon to teach the riders the best way to wash their hands to, avoid getting sick. They thought about the pillows and mattresses the riders were using, making sure they got good sleep. They even painted the inside of their team truck white so they could spot any little speck of dust that might affect the bikes. It was crazy detailed.
Sounds a little obsessive, right? But the results, they were undeniable. Just 5 years after Brailsford took over, at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, the British cycling team dominated. They won 60% of the gold medals in road and track cycling. And then, in the 2012 London Olympics, they broke 9 Olympic records, 7 world records. And that same year, Bradley Wiggins becomes the first British cyclist to win the Tour de France.
And that was just the beginning. His teammate Chris Froome wins the Tour de France the next year, then again in 2015, 2016, and 2017. So in just 10 years, they win tons of world championships, Olympic medals, Paralympic medals, 5 Tour de France victories. It's seen as one of the most successful periods in cycling history. And it all shows how powerful these small 1% improvements can be when they add up over time. What's really fascinating is how this focus on the details, on the system, not just the outcome, led to these incredible results.
That's the key takeaway, right? It's easy to think, 1% doesn't matter. But think about this. If you get 1% better every day for a year, by the end of that year, you'll be 37 times better. On the flip side, if you get 1% worse each day, you'll be almost down to nothing. It's like compound interest, but for personal growth. Your habits, they multiply over time.
It really is like compound interest. Just like money grows exponentially, so do the results of your habits. They might not seem like much day to day, but over months and years, the difference is huge. It's often when you look back that you realize, wow, good habits made a huge difference, and bad habits, well, they cost a lot.
And that's exactly why it's so tough to stick with those small positive changes, right? We don't see big results right away, so we kind of dismiss them. You save a little money today, you're not suddenly rich. You hit the gym a couple times this week, you're not instantly ripped. You study a language for an hour, you're not fluent. Because the progress is gradual, it's easy to just fall back into our old ways.
And the opposite is true too, which is maybe even trickier. Because bad habits decline slowly, we let them slide. One unhealthy meal doesn't make you gain a ton of weight. One late night neglecting your family doesn't ruin everything. One day of procrastination doesn't usually kill a project. But these little things, when they happen over and over, they turn into big problems down the road.
There's this analogy he uses that's really good about a plane flying from LA to New York. If the pilot changes course just a tiny bit, like 3.5 degrees south, you won't end up in New York. You'll be in Washington, D.C. It's a tiny change at the beginning. You barely notice it, but over the whole flight, it makes a huge difference to where you end up. Same thing with habits. Those little shifts every day can steer you in totally different directions over the long term.
So it becomes more about the direction you're heading in than where you are right now. If you're doing well financially, but you spend more than you earn, that's not sustainable. On the other hand, if you're struggling, but you save a little bit each month, you're on the right track, even if it feels slow at first. Your current results are just a delayed reflection of your past habits.
Think about it. Your net worth, that's a lagging indicator of your financial habits. Your weight, that's your eating habits. How much you know, that's your learning habits. The state of your house, that's your cleaning habits. You get what you repeat, basically. Time either works for you or against you, and that's all because of habits. Good habits make time your friend. Bad habits make it your enemy.
And these habits can compound in so many ways. Take productivity, for example. Just getting one more meaningful thing done each day can add up to big career advancements over time. Knowledge, too. Every new thing you learn builds on what you already know. Warren Buffett calls this the compound interest of knowledge. Even relationships. Small, consistent acts of kindness and connection, they build strong, supportive networks over time.
But it works the other way too, and that's a little scary. Stress from everyday frustrations can build up and turn into health problems. Negative thoughts can get stuck in a loop, making you feel worse and worse about yourself. Even societal issues like, widespread anger and outrage, you can see those as the result of lots of little grievances piling up over time.
He introduces this concept called the plateau of latent potential that I think is really helpful. Imagine an ice cube in a room that's 25 degrees. The temperature starts going up, 26, 27, 28, and nothing happens to the ice cube. Then it hits 32 degrees and boom, it starts to melt. That 1 degree, it doesn't seem different from the ones before, but it creates a huge change.
It's like bamboo, right? It spends years growing its roots underground, then suddenly shoots up 90 feet in just a few weeks. Habits are kind of like that. You can be putting in the work, making changes, but not seeing any results for a while. It's discouraging, and it's why a lot of people give up before they get to the good part.
That's what he calls the valley of disappointment. We expect progress to be a straight line, but often it's not. You start new habits, but it feels like you're not getting anywhere. The key is to remember that the big results, they often come later. It doesn't mean what you're doing is pointless. It just means you haven't reached that tipping point yet. All the work you're doing is like being stored up, waiting for that moment.
And when that breakthrough finally happens, it can look like an overnight success to other people. But it's because of all the work you put in before when it seemed like nothing was happening. It's like that story of the stonecutter who keeps hammering at a rock 100 times, no cracks. Then, on the 101st hit, it splits in two. It wasn't just that last hit, it was all the ones before it that mattered.
That leads to something really important. We need to focus on building systems, not just setting goals. For a long time, people have said, set specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound goals. But there are some problems with focusing only on goals.
Like a lot of times, the people who succeed and the people who don't, they have the same goals at the beginning. Think about sports. Every team starts the season wanting to win the championship. In business, tons of people want to build $1 million company. The goal itself isn't what separates the winners from the losers.
Right. And just looking at goals can give you a distorted view, what we call survivorship bias. We see the people who made it and think, oh, it was their goals that did it, but we forget about all the people who had those same goals and didn't get there. So what's a better way? Focus on your systems, the processes and routines that actually get you those results.
Let's say you're a coach. Your goal might be to win a championship, but your system is how you recruit players, how you develop them, how you manage the team, how you structure practices, or you're an entrepreneur. Goal, successful business. System, how you come up with ideas, test them, build your team, market your product. Or a musician. Goal, master a tough piece of music. System, how often you practice, how you structure those sessions, how you approach the hard parts.
The big question to ask is, if you forgot about your goals and just focused on making your systems better, would you still get good results? In any sport, the goal is to get the highest score, but the only way to do that is to train and play better. Like they say, the score takes care of itself. Same idea applies to a lot of things in life.
So instead of getting fixated on the end result, focus on building better systems. Goals give you direction, but systems are what get you moving. And if you're finding it hard to change your habits, it might not be because you lack willpower or motivation. It could be that your system is working against you. Bad habits repeat not because you don't want to change, but because your system keeps pulling you back. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
And that brings us back to atomic habits. They're not just any small habits, they're the building blocks of a larger system. Just like atoms make up molecules, atomic habits are those tiny, manageable routines that, when you put them together and do them consistently, lead to big results over time. They might seem insignificant on their own, but they build on each other, fueling those bigger achievements. They're both small and powerful, part of a bigger picture.
Okay, now let's talk about the connection between your habits and your sense of identity. Why is it so easy to slip back into old, bad habits and so hard to stick with good ones? He says it's often because we try to change at the wrong level. There are 3 different levels of change.
Think of them like layers, like an onion. The outermost layer is changing your outcomes, the results you want. Losing weight, finishing a project. The next layer is changing your processes, the habits and systems you use. Starting a new workout routine, organizing your workspace. But the innermost layer, the one he says is most important for lasting change, is changing your identity, your core beliefs about yourself, the story you tell yourself, your self-image.
Most of us start with outcomes. We set goals for what we want. But he says that building identity-based habits is much better for long-term success. So you start by figuring out who you want to be.
Imagine 2 people trying to quit smoking. Someone offers them a cigarette. The first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." Okay, that makes sense, but they still see themselves as a smoker who's trying to stop. The second person says, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." It's a subtle difference in the words, but it means they see themselves differently. Smoking is part of their past, not who they are now.
That's the main idea here. A lot of people try to change their habits without changing how they see themselves. They set goals, figure out what to do, but they don't change their self-image. And that old identity can sabotage their efforts without them even realizing it. Because behind every set of actions, there's a set of beliefs and identity that shapes and reinforces those actions. If your behavior doesn't match your core sense of self, it won't last.
You might really want to be healthier, but if deep down you see yourself as someone who values comfort and instant gratification more than long-term well-being, you'll keep choosing relaxing activities over exercise. It's super hard to change what you do if you haven't changed the beliefs that led to those actions in the first place. You might have a new goal and a plan, but you still identify with the person who did those old things.
He tells this story about an entrepreneur named Brian Clark who used to bite his nails his whole life. He tried to quit using willpower, had some success, but then he did something interesting. He went and got a manicure.
And it wasn't just the money he spent on the manicure that stopped him from biting his nails. It was that for the first time, his nails looked good, and the person who did the manicure even complimented them. This little thing changed how he saw himself. He started to see himself as someone who cared about his appearance, specifically his nails. That shift in identity, that's what did it. He never bit his nails again.
The most powerful motivation comes when a habit becomes part of who you believe you are. There's a big difference between thinking, I want to be the kind of person who does this, and actually believing I am that person. The more pride you feel about a part of your identity, the more you'll want to keep up the habits that fit with that identity. Real change that lasts, is about changing who you are.
You might start a habit because of something external, but you'll only keep it up if it becomes part of who you believe yourself to be. Improvements are temporary until they become part of your identity. The goal isn't just to read a bunch of books. It's to become a reader. It's not just to run a marathon. It's to become a runner. Your actions show who you are, deep down.
And there's research to back this up. Studies have found that people who saw themselves as voters were much more likely to actually vote than people who just said they planned to vote. When your actions and your identity match up, doing the right thing becomes almost automatic because you're just acting in a way that fits with what you believe about yourself.
But this connection between habits and identity can also work against you. Once you've internalized a certain identity, it can be really hard to do things that contradict it. We tell ourselves these limiting stories like, I'm not a morning person, or I'm bad with names, and then we unconsciously resist anything that doesn't fit that image. We feel this strong pressure to stay consistent with how we see ourselves.
So how do you actually change your identity? He lays out 2 steps. First, decide what kind of person you want to be. And second, prove that identity to yourself with small, consistent wins.
You're not born with these beliefs about yourself. Every belief is learned and reinforced through your experiences, and importantly, through your habits. Your habits are how you live out your identity in the real world. Making your bed every morning reinforces the identity of an organized person. Writing regularly, that's the identity of a creative person. Working out consistently, the identity of an athletic person. Your identity is literally what you repeatedly do, who you repeatedly are.
Whatever you believe about yourself right now, you believe it because you've seen evidence for it. If you've gone to church every week for years, you have proof that you're religious. If you always make time to study, you have proof that you're studious. If you get to the gym, even when you don't feel like it, you're building proof that you're committed to fitness. The more proof you gather, the stronger that belief gets.
So if you want to change your identity, you need to start gathering new evidence that supports the person you want to be. Every action you take is like a vote for that person. One action won't change everything overnight, but as you keep voting, the evidence piles up and your identity starts to shift. That's why these seemingly small habits are so important. They're real-world proof of who you're becoming.
It's like evolution, right? You don't just wake up one day as a completely different person. You change little by little, habit by habit. Each new habit is like a little signal to yourself, hey, maybe this is who I am now. If you keep finishing books, you start to see yourself as someone who enjoys reading. If you go for runs regularly, you start to identify as someone who values exercise.
And it works both ways. Your habits shape your identity, and your identity shapes your habits. It's a feedback loop. The key is to let your values and principles drive that loop, not just the results you want. Ask yourself, what kind of person consistently gets this kind of result? And then start taking small steps to become that person.
He talks about a friend of his who lost a lot of weight by asking herself one question. What would a healthy person do in this situation? Would a healthy person walk or take a taxi? Would they order a salad or a burger? By acting like a healthy person over and over, she started to really believe she was a healthy person, and the weight loss followed naturally.
In the end, he says that habits matter so much because they help you become who you want to be. They're not just about goals or possessions, they're about building your character. You literally become your habits. So the most important question isn't, what do I want to achieve? But who do I want to become? The first step isn't figuring out the what or the how, it's about the who. Are you becoming the kind of person you want to be? That's what you need to ask yourself.
So we've talked about how small changes can lead to big results and how our habits actually shape who we are. But how do we actually put this into practice? How do we break those bad habits that are holding us back and build good ones that stick? That's what we'll be digging into in the next part of this deep dive.
Yeah, we're going to get into the specifics of Clear's 4-step model Q, craving, response, reward. We'll break it down, give you practical strategies for each step. Because understanding how habits work is one thing, but actually changing them, well, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly. So stay tuned for part 2 of this deep dive, where we'll give you the tools to start building those atomic habits and become the best version of yourself.
See you there.